So I was recently watching a YouTube video about the trauma that gender nonconforming people often face and the way that it affects us. And it made me realize something. It made me realize that I don't think most straight cis-presenting people understand the prevalence of violence and hatred towards our community and the full effect of what that does to us. So I want to share a personal story of something that happened to me. It may be very triggering for you. We're going to be discussing an attempt of violence and SA against me. It was thankfully not a successful attempt. But we are going to be talking about those issues, so if you don't want to hear about that right now, it's okay. You don't have to watch this one. So I wanted to give a content warning out right away. Also, this is one of those ones that's really hard for me to make, and I probably won't be able to contain it into one video, so there's very well maybe multiple parts. And because of how difficult this subject is for me, those parts might not come out one after the other, kind of like the rant series that I recently completed. There might be a bit of a gap between some of the videos. Within 2 weeks of beginning social transition, so I wasn't even on HRT or anything like that yet, I had just begun wearing femme clothes and makeup and stuff outside of my apartment. And I'd only been doing that for less than a couple of weeks. So within that time period is when this event occurred. And essentially, I was just walking to the grocery store. The grocery store is maybe 10, 12 blocks away from me. I make that walk all the time. I had recently changed my route because the route that I was taking, I had noticed that a few people had yelled slurs at me and kind of harassed me a little bit. So I changed my route to one that I felt would be safer. This route was through a quiet residential neighborhood, sort of secluded from any main streets. And as I began walking down this street, which is really just like one street over from where I live, to be honest. And as I'm walking down this street, I notice a car following me with one man inside of it. That man then pulled up beside me, looked at me, and without saying anything, just went like this. It wasn't in a fun, flirty way or anything like that. It was in an extremely menacing way. I was getting super bad vibes, so I just said as loud as I can, "I don't know you and I don't want to talk to you." To which he responded, "Come here." I said the same thing again. He said, "Just come here." He kept trying to get me to go to his car. When I left the corner where this had happened, he began following me, and he followed me for several blocks. So I'll go more into details in the next parts. Just like with the last one, please heed the content warning. So yeah, this man began following me for several blocks. He basically did the same shtick over and over again where he would pull up, alongside me and try to get me to come to his car, and I would be as loud as I can and just say, "I don't know you, please leave me alone," in the hopes that, maybe there would be eyes on me from the people in the neighborhood that might be able to protect me if he tried anything. He was clearly getting frustrated by the fact that I was doing this, and he sped away. Only for the next block, when I came to an intersection, I found that he was waiting for me to my left, ready to cross the intersection as soon as I got there. He had just been sitting there waiting for me to show up because he knew that was the direction that I was going. He then waited for me to enter the intersection and began crossing so that he could block my path with his car, which he did. He blocked my path. The driver's side door was on the opposite side of me, and he got out, presumably to try to get me in. I picked up the pace and got the fuck out of there, but he kept following. He kept, coming up alongside me. He kept, leaving and then coming back. He kept, doing the whole trying to go into intersections that I was entering. At one point, he kind of made it seem like he was going to hit me with his car. The guy was just really, really aggressively trying to do something bad. Maybe the intent was just to intimidate me. Maybe this was all some sort of misunderstanding, but that's not the way that it seems to me. And, I can't read this man's mind, but just the way it felt to me, it felt like he was trying to abduct me. He wanted to get me into his car over my clear and frequent and loud objections loud enough for others to hear. And he was so committed to doing this that he kept going even after my attempts to bring attention to what was going on and that sort of thing. He was very persistent. Eventually, I found a house where a family was having like a barbecue out on their front lawn. There was probably a dozen people there. So once I got there, I just stopped and waited for him, and he eventually came. So I was just standing on the sidewalk in front of the family. They were probably wondering what the fuck I was doing there. And he comes along, and he sees that I'm not moving, so he just pulls up and he rolls down his window and he's like, "Hey, just come here." Like he's trying to play it cool. I do my same thing. I say, "I don't know you. You've been following me for blocks. Please leave me alone." And then he just kind of sits there silent, and I repeat myself over and over and over again. The family in the lawn are kind of freaking out. They don't know what to think about this, but eventually he thinks better of it and he drives away. So I'll continue this in part 3. There's more to say. There is heavy construction going on in my apartment right now, so please forgive the background noises. So, I told you the story about the man who presumably wanted to abduct me or something. He had some sort of bad intentions for me and was following me for several blocks and blocking me with his vehicle and wouldn't go away until I basically made him go away. And I mentioned in my first video that the reason I wanted to make this series is because I had watched a video about the traumatic effects of a similar experience for somebody else in the queer community. Now, the physical and emotional consequences for the person telling that other story were a lot more severe than they were in my case, but they said something that I would just relate to super hard, and they put something into words that I had felt, but I hadn't quite recognized in myself, and it's a pretty dramatic thing. He said, "A part of me died that day." And that's true for me too. A part of me died that day, just as like a part of me died the day that my family rejected me, and a part of me died when I realized that my employer was now discriminating against me based on my gender identity, and the way that a part of me died when I realized that all my friends that were boys were suddenly treating me differently and objectifying me and that sort of thing. Those things hit me real hard because they all happened very soon after beginning transition. And there were just parts of my life, axiomatic assumptions about the world around me and the people around me and that sort of thing that was just immediately yanked away. Any sense of safety that I was able to derive from those was just removed from me immediately. This is especially true when it comes to the man who was whatever on the street, because any illusion of physical safety that I had was immediately shredded. That day I realized that anytime I leave my home alone, I'm fair game. Period. I just am. And these other difficult experiences that I talked about, those also stripped away parts of my reality where I felt safe, and I realized that there was no actual safety there, and in some cases that those people and those groups were actually going to be harmful to me going forward. I'm a different person now because of those experiences. I'm angry. I used to not be an angry person. I am so angry. I often feel extremely hopeless. I used to not be a hopeless person. There have been so many changes, and I don't like them. Still more construction. We'll see if it keeps up. So in the last part, the very last thing that I said was that there have been a lot of changes and I do not like them. But I wanted to clarify that those changes aren't as a result of like HRT or coming into my gender expression or anything like that. Those changes have occurred solely as a result of the way that people have reacted to those things. When my father told me that he loved me no matter what, forever, and that nothing would ever change that, I believed him. That turned out not to be the case. That was a fundamental truth of my reality. I thought that no matter what I did, I would always have my father's loving support. I learned that that was not true. I used to think that news of hate crimes against queer people were overblown, that it was a rarer thing than it actually is, and not as severe of an issue as it actually is. Obviously, I was wrong. That misconception was taken from me rather harshly and quickly. I used to think that claims of trans people not being able to access medical care because of their gender expression was overblown, and that in reality it was just a few isolated cases of people with strong religious convictions, and that there were other places where people could receive these services. Obviously, that was extremely naive and just purely wrong. See, transition didn't actually, well, at least in the changes that I'm referring to, transition itself didn't cause those changes. What caused those changes was the trauma that I experienced because of how people reacted to me coming out as transgender and expressing myself as I really am. It dispelled a lot of illusions about the world and the people around me that I was very attached to and that I clung to for hope and for feeling safe. And I realized that hope was misplaced, that safety never actually existed, and that the world is just a much darker and bleaker place than I thought that it was. All of this also helped me to realize the role that I played in stigmatizing queer people and contributing to this environment that currently exists. And that's also been something that's been very difficult for me to grapple with. But the physical changes, the way that HRT has changed my moment-to-moment perception of reality and just how I am, the social changes that have occurred as a result of transition in the sense that people refer to me by my pronouns and treat me as a woman, all of those things are great and they've saved my life. So whatever trauma I'm going through because of this, it was all worth it.